First of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you, IVCA. Congratulations on the Clean Air Forum. First of all, we should congratulate and applaud everyone for being here on 1st of July, wherein air pollution is not on the news. Nobody is really talking about it and acknowledging that it's a year-long issue. So congratulations to everyone for being here. When we talk about air pollution, the conversation usually begins with, oh, it's a public health imperative, it's an economic crisis. Anita touched a lot upon it. I am here to actually change that narrative and talk about how clean air is actually one of the largest economic opportunity for India right now. Okay, let me first just ground us at the scale of the challenge. Today is July 1st. The average AQI right now is 100 and 120. The chart that you see on the left-hand side, you see a green line there. That's what a good AQI looks like. Today it's 100. It is already 2x of that, and nobody's talking about it. And you do see the peaks, which are at 350, 320, which is generally during the early season. So it is not something which needs to be only talked about in the agricultural season. It is a health imperative during the entire season. In 2019, we did a study with the Clean Air Forum, the Clean Air Fund, wherein we talked about the economic cost. And I know Anita already talked about the economic cost. Very similar to that, the numbers are staggering. Even way back in 2019, $100 billion of economic cost every year. The good news is that India is actually not standing still. I just want to understand and paint a picture that National Clean Air NCAP was actually launched in 2019. 131 cities were covered in NCAP. Almost 7,000 crores have actually been utilized. And it has actually led to a 13% reduction in the national average. So their momentum is there. The next question is, how do you really scale that momentum? Now, if we see just the average numbers for air quality in India, and this is across India. I'm not talking about only the metro cities, I'm not talking about Delhi. In 2019, it was around 58. Now it's actually around 50. And if you just see the average, it's very close to a safe value of PM 2.5. So people might think that, oh, on an average, it's only like a Delhi problem. It's not an India problem, but it is actually an India problem, because even if we see the average, you see on the right-hand side, 40% of the days are still unhealthy. And those days actually cause illnesses. Those days actually cause labor productivity. So we should not only think of it as a Delhi-specific problem. It is an India-specific problem. Okay, this actually brings me to a change in narrative, right? We always talk about the economic costs. We talk about the loss in tourism. We feel that there's a change in narrative here, wherein we need to think of clean air as a large economic opportunity. How do you define it? Number one, the overall investment required, or the capital which can be mobilized into clean air investable solutions. And we'll talk about some of the investable solutions right now in this presentation. Number two is the jobs that can be either transitioned into a greener economy or new jobs which can actually be created through new solutions. Three is the annual economic value that those new jobs and new value chains can actually create, and we'll talk about some of those. Fourth is all the co-benefits, right? So clean air, there are many solutions which give you co-benefits with carbon, which is something that Amit also talked about. Fifth is actually the cost savings, which is just reduced import bills, reduced policy subsidies on things like fertilizers. And fifth is the economic gains, which is what primarily Anita talked about. Okay, what we did is we looked at 13 solutions. And the idea is that the solutions exist. I know there are new solutions being developed, but this is not something we do not require a silver bullet. We analyzed 13 solutions across 8 sectors. We only focus on solutions where we felt that there is an ability to move the needle, where there is some policy momentum, but which are still nascent enough. So for example, if you see in transport, we focus a lot on electric buses and trucks, because there's a lot of movements on two-wheelers, three-wheelers. If you would have read the latest Delhi EV policy, things are fairly strong there. When we talk about agriculture, again, there are other XC2, in C2, we focus on CBGs and biopellets. When we talk about residential combustion, although LPG distribution is great, if you see, look at some of the areas, let's say even in Delhi in non-notified slums, people are still using coal biomass for burning. Then we talk about waste management, which is, we feel, a big, big opportunity. We're going to discuss, I think, part of that in the panel as well. We focus on compressed biogas plants, MRF. Now, these are some of the other solutions which we feel are extremely important, may not actually generate an entire new value chain, a lot of economic opportunity, but need to be dealt with. So in power, we have all talked about and we have all seen FGDs, wherein there was a clear mandate. For industries, if we see Delhi NCR, there are so many brick-ins, so many of them are actually not legal. They are still using old version of brick-ins. If you talk about road dust, which is actually a big challenge in Delhi, you would have seen that Delhi government now is hiring MRS, mechanical road sweepers. And last is actually just on the censoring methodology, technology. Then what we did was we combined all of these 8 sectors across 6 things. The 5th number is what Anita was talking about, and the numbers are almost in the same level, and I'll go through the number as well. First 4 is actually very sector specific, and last one is the overall economic gains. Then we actually talked about if we really think there are 3 order of outcomes. One order is just the transition of jobs to, let's say, or transition of overall economy towards a greener economy. So if you think of electric vehicles, we feel it's a transition. Second order outcomes is actually newer value chains, right? If you see, for example, biopellets, waste management, there are newer value chains which can help create newer jobs, which can help create newer revenue stream, newer economic output. And the last thing is actually what Anita was talking about, which is like the 260 billion number in terms of the presenteeism, absenteeism, brain drain, etc. We feel that this is important. Even if we reduce PM 2.5 by 20%, we can actually generate an overall economic value of 220 billion. What you mean is the first order outcome is actually, which is transitioning to a green economy, is roughly 80 billion. Second order outcomes is actually creating newer value chain, which is 60 billion. Third order outcomes is actually what Anita was talking about, which if we just reduce it by 20% is 85. If I completely reduce air quality, this entire number goes 3x, 4x. So if you relay the number, Anita had like 250 billion, so it's actually 3x or 4x if I reduce. But that's not only that. If you see on the right-hand side, we can also abate 4% of India's emissions. We can also reduce 10 million dalis, and I think Anita talked about some of the healthcare expenditure. If I only think from a sector angle and talk about the first and second order, we feel the largest economic value is obviously in transport, wherein we talk about the transition to buses, to trucks. This we feel is, again, the first order outcomes. Second order outcomes, a lot of opportunity in solid waste and agriculture, wherein new value chains will actually be created. And the third is when you see power, construction, industries, monitoring, there you see the overall economic value might be lower, but these are certain things which we feel we really need to solve for, because tackling air pollution only one sector is not going to help all of us. I'll probably skip this because this is very similar to what Anita talked about. This is the number 85 billion is only if we reduce it by 20%. So you're talking about presenteeism, you're talking about consumer footfall, you're talking about brain drain, you're talking about premature mortality, healthcare expenditure, absenteeism. This is only with 20% reduction. If I go 100%, it's 250 billion plus. Okay, so what do we know? What do we need to do? 5 levers. Air pollution is not something which can be solved by investors alone, by government alone, by private sector alone. First and foremost is we can't expect public to do all the outlay. We really need to crowd in private capital and match which of the sectors and solutions is actually something which can generate returns for private sector investors. Second, we need to prototype regionally. What works in Delhi NCR may not work in Maharashtra. And some of the solutions that you saw, something like solid waste management, is a much more complicated issue, and we really need to go in and do deeper dives in each state. Third is we need to skill. right? So even if I talk about waste management, segregation, or if I talk about compressed biogas plants, we need to skill the people first and also think about jobs which might get displaced and how do we reskill those people, think about livelihoods. Fourth and fifth is, I think the fifth is very important in terms of communities, right? It is not something which government can solve alone, not something that private sector investors can solve alone. We also need communities. Very simple example is waste management. I don't know how many of us really segregate our waste at home. Unfortunately, I live in a society, a lot of behavior change exercises were there, but still 80% people do not. Now, there is policymakers can play a role in terms of setting mandates, policy, regulations. That's not alone. Private sector need to understand which of these solutions are investable to them. Public financiers need to understand which of the sector, if they're not directly investable for the private sector, how can they bring in blended finance, how can they bring in risk share facilities and make those solutions investable for private sector. Private sector, again, then the solution that I talked about is not something which is, okay, this is the entire exhaustive list of playbooks. I know many of them are actually building new solutions. So we need to continue to invest and build on the new solutions. And civil society, again, and by civil society, I mean everyone who's gathered there. I feel we are all part of civil society. We need to continue doing such events, raising awareness, doing these change campaigns. I know you might have a lot of questions, but I'll pass it on to Jagjeet to actually do the hard part in answering all the questions. Thank you so much.